Okay, welcome back. We are going to start with our 6.7 1 p.m. item, consideration of report to the Board of Supervisors explaining the emergency conditions that necessitated the summary abatement for the property located at 10305 Hoke Haas Ha Lane, Kelseyville, APN number 043-34307. I'm going to pass this over to Community Development.
Thank you, Mireya Turner, Community Development Director. The summary abatement report will be handled by our Code Enforcement Manager.
Good afternoon. My name is Marcus Beltramo. I'm the Code Enforcement Manager for the Community Development Department. Today we are here to meet a statutory requirement to provide a report when a summary abatement is conducted. We're statutorily required to provide a report at the next Board of Supervisors meeting, and that's what is occurring here today. Again, the property is 10305 Hoke Haas Ha Lane in Kelseyville. We provide a map here. I think the map's important. The property outlined in yellow is the subject property. I want to make note and mention directly to the southwest of that property is a wetland, a pond, in direct proximity to the property, and that was part of our concern. The code section here for summary abatements in Chapter 13, this basically just outlines the conditions for a summary abatement and the rules. Also references Chapter 5 as part of the process there. As part of the process, we provide a 48 notice of summary abatement to the owners, letting them know that the conditions require immediate abatement. Again, a summary abatement is immediate issues, health and safety issues, and that's what we were addressing here in this situation. In our 48-hour notice, we cited the following public nuisance violations. Chapter 13, Article 1, Section 13-3.1. Should be subsection E4, any condition dangerous to human life, unsafe, or detrimental to public health or safety. Any use of land, buildings, or premises established, operated, or maintained contrary to the provisions of Chapter 13, Chapter 5, and Chapter 21. Specifically in Chapter 5, the IPMC, the International Property Maintenance Code. Subsection 7, existence of garbage, rubbish, refuse, waste matter, contrary to the provisions of Chapter 921, or which creates a fire hazard. Which creates a fire hazard is one of the issues involved here today. Any items causing unsightly appearance which is visible from the scenic corridor, public right-of-way, sites of neighboring properties, or which provides harbors for rats or other vermin, which is another issue involved here today, or creates other potential health hazard or a public nuisance. These are the issues cited in the 48-hour notice. There is additional basis for the summary abatement. Under the California Health and Safety Code 17920.3, Subdivision A. This is the substandard building code under the California Health and Safety Code. Subsection 5, lack of hot and cold running water to the plumbing or fixtures in the dwelling unit, infestation of insects, vermin, or rodents. Subdivision J there, those premises on which an accumulation of weeds, vegetation, junk, dead organic matter, debris, garbage, offal, rodent harborages, stagnant water, combustible materials, and similar materials or conditions constitute a fire, health, and safety hazard. We believe the issues here today meet those three requirements or elements: fire, health, and safety hazards. From the IPMC, that's the International Property Maintenance Code, we cite Section 302.1, sanitation. Exterior property and premises shall be maintained in a clean, safe, and sanitary condition. The occupant shall keep that part of the exterior property that such occupant occupies or controls in a clean, sanitary condition. 302.5, rodent harborage. Structures and exterior property should be kept free from rodent harborage and infestation. Where rodents are found, they shall be promptly exterminated by approved processes that will not be injurious to human health. After pest elimination, proper precautions shall be taken to limit rodent harborage and prevent reinfestation. We also cited section of the IPMC 305.1. The interior of a structure and equipment therein shall be maintained in good repair, structurally sound, and in a sanitary condition. The issues here were not in a sanitary condition. Occupants shall keep that part of the structure that they occupy or control in a clean sanitary condition. Every owner of a structure containing a rooming house, housekeeping units, a hotel, dormitory, 2 or more dwelling units, or 2 or more non-residential occupancy shall maintain in a clean and sanitary condition the shared or public areas of the structure and exterior of the property. Also in the IPMC is another rubbish or garbage code we cited, or the basis is section 308.1. And then the last section we had a basis for the summary abatement is the IPMC subdivision BE 702.1. A safe, continuous, and unobstructed path of travel shall be provided from any point in the building or structure to the public way. Means of egress shall comply with the International Fire Code. That was an issue here as well that required immediate abatement. Now I'm going to provide the evidence to support the summary abatement. The pictures you're seeing here are on the front porch. First off, I just want to say, when you approach the property, there was a foul, strong odor emanating from the property. You can smell it from the street. You could smell it pulling down onto Ha Lane. You could smell the odor. It was that strong. I also want to mention Code Officer Chris Colin and Code Enforcement Supervisor Norman Valdez were on site. They can also testify to their direct observations as to the noxious odor or foul odor that emanated. Each room had its own distinct, strong odor. On the picture there on the left, you can see the exposed trash to the elements. It's not properly bagged or containerized. That is a health issue. Here's further pictures to kind of demonstrate the garbage and trash that's exposed to the elements. The back deck, this is what's on the back deck. This is all saturated, contaminated, unsanitary conditions, exposed elements to the trash. A lot of the materials, items that were abated were saturated and covered in urine, dog feces, rat feces, and therefore were deemed to be immediate. And I also want to mention the wetlands is directly behind this back deck. There's a backyard and then the wetlands start. The interior of the property, just for a little bit of background, we came to the property, we saw the outside of the property. Based on our training experience, we had reasonable belief there were more additional violations occurring that were immediate. So in order to understand the extent and the scope of those issues, we obtained an inspection warrant and that's how we got these pictures. Only from the information obtained through the inspection warrant did we request a summary abatement. And here are photos of the inside. The left is a mattress covered and saturated in urine and other type of unsanitary liquids or materials. On the right is shelving. And why I put this picture in here is if you could see the little pellets, those are all rat feces. And that was throughout the entire house. Here's some more pictures. On the left, you can see that's a bathroom and I guess a hallway to the bathroom, but exposed trash, rubbish, garbage. Also, that is a fire issue. It impedes the egress. And on the right, you can see the rodent or vermins, how they're chewing through the wall. The area in front of the holes, although it's not the greatest picture, is still covered in rat feces. To the left again is I believe it's the same bathroom, just a different angle. On the right, you can see the trash, garbage, rubbish, all in there, unbagged, uncontainerized, exposed to the elements, along with rat feces and dog feces.
And Marcus, these are inoperable bathrooms because there's no water.
Yeah, so the water, we did speak with the occupants. So there's 3 property owners. 1 occupant was actually occupying the house. They admitted the water had been disconnected. They were using a potable water source around the corner to get water. We did call the water company and confirmed it. They were delinquent, and it didn't appear that they couldn't demonstrate they had the financial means to get the water back on. So yes, the water was turned off. It had been turned off for some time. I believe my officers can comment to the period it had been turned off, but there was no water to clean, no water to flush the toilets. But I'm not here today about the toilets, which were in an unsanitary state. But yes, the water was turned off. We did red tag the property as soon as we discovered that or established that was occurring. Again, on the left, just miscellaneous items. On the right, oh, I'm sorry. Let me walk that back. So when we went into the house, 2 rooms were barricaded. So on the left, if you see on the back there, that is a mattress covering up a doorway. And so we had to remove that. That's also an emergency egress. If they have to get out, can't get out through that room. It's barricaded. Behind that mattress, as you can see on the left, is the left corner of the mattress, is the stuff behind it. And then that's what was behind that mattress and that door. Again, that bed is covered in dog feces, I believe. It's saturated with urine. There's a strong odor emanating from it. They basically had closed that room off. The second room that was barricaded was the garage. On the left is the inside of the house. The garage door is off to the right. The picture on the right is when you were able to open the door, and there's the trash behind it. If they had to get out through the garage, they could not. There's 5 feet of trash stacked in the garage. And we will provide evidence of the garage issues later on here in this presentation. Here's another picture of the door of the garage. The reason I put this picture in here is it gives you a better idea. If you look down to the bottom, to the right, that's used toilet paper. That's what's in that garage, along with other unsanitary materials. This is when the garage we were able to finally open the garage. We could not go through the inside of the house. We had to open the garage, which was a task in itself. A lot of the stuff that's out there is the stuff from the back porch and the inside. But these pictures just tell you how much trash and unsanitary materials. And I do want to reiterate, the summary abatement is only for those immediate issues. There's still a lot of stuff there that we did not take. We just determined we had a basis to take this, and we needed to do an immediate summary abatement to remove the immediate health and safety issues.
Can I ask a question?
Sorry.
Can I ask a question?
You just turn it off.
Can I ask a question about the garbage here? You said it's from the, did you move it to the front?
So the contractors took it off the back porch and from the inside of the house, and they put it there so they could use their excavator to put it into the dumpster.
Okay, so when you arrived to the house, the garage door was closed and there was no
garage door
garbage on the outside?
I'm sorry. Yes, the garage door was closed and could not be opened.
But there was no garbage outside?
The garbage was on the front porch area that we observed initially. It's only when we did the inspection work did we find these conditions on the back porch and inside the house.
Okay, so just to again be clear, the garbage that's in the front was not there. The garage door was closed. This is garbage from the backside that was brought to the front to make it easy for the contractors to do the cleanup. Okay.
What this, I guess the best way to put this
I
in,
assume that this is how it was found when I went through the pictures originally, so that's why I just wanted to clarify.
I apologize. It was not my intent to
no need for
mislead.
apology.
I think this picture just kind of gives you the scope of the unsanitary issues that were abated, and I apologize for that. And as you can see, this is a closer-up picture, and you can see the unsanitary material, food items, trash, and garbage that were being stored in the house, on the back porch, and in the garage area. Just to kind of give you, elaborate on your issue before about the garage door, one of the contractors had to climb through that door that was open, climb through that to get the switch there so the garage door could be pulled open. Also,
With a short straw.
I also want to mention in the garage were several rat's nests. When they moved the piles, the rats would just scatter all throughout the house. What these photos here are of the electrical in the garage. And the rats were gnawing through the outside of the wires and were getting to the wire itself. Now remember, the garage is stacked with 5 feet high of trash and garbage. They cannot get out. There's no one that can get in there to repair the wires. The rats are chewing at them. If a spark does happen, there's a lot of materials there that were at a fire risk, and we believed, so we abated this, 1, for the health and safety issues, 2, for the emergency egress issues, eliminate the potential fire risk issues. In my experience, I've seen a lot of these properties in this county, and the conditions here, in my experience, were leading up to a possible fire. And so I just wanted to have that picture in to further substantiate the need for the immediate summary abatement in the garage area. We hired Lenders Hauling to do the abatement. The total abatement cost was $6,687.35. That does not include cost recovery. We're not here for a lien hearing. This is just to kind of give you a report. We will be coming forward with a lien hearing after the second notice expires and if we have to abate it again. Lucky for us, the property's in foreclosure. Well, let me walk that back. The property is in foreclosure. There's an asset management company that is taking possession of the property for the pre-foreclosure process. They've reached out to us, and they've said they'll abate the remaining issues and pay the cost for the lien and our cost recovery.
What is the timeline for that?
I'm sorry.
For the asset management company to continue the abatement? My concern is the rats are in the walls, and there's probably a lot of other wires that have been chewed up, and so they're...
Off PG&E.
Chris, you want to speak to that? So Chris has been dealing directly with the asset management company. He can give you the best information of what their steps they're going to take.
Good afternoon. My name is Christopher Cullen, Code Enforcement Officer of the County of Lake. So the House has a 30-day notice of violation, 30-day notice of nuisance in order to abate, which has been relayed to the property preservation company, Cyprex Services. They have to issue a 48-hour notice to occupants to make sure that the property is clear, and then they can start moving
There's no
forward.
one occupying that property.
No, but that's part of their due process.
It would be a procedural issue.
I just making sure.
Go ahead, Chris.
So they have indicated that they have a large interest in negating any further fees or encumbrances on the property, and they want to actually take care of the costs already associated with the property and clean up before it is actually leaned against the title. So financially, they seem to be very motivated. So I believe they should be acting before the 30 days expires on both notices.
So we don't have a definitive date, but it seems like they want to get this taken care of. So I don't have a date to give you, a specific
And
date.
we'll be recovering these costs.
So the asset management or preservation company has already talked to us. I'm sending them the invoices now for the contractor's fee. I told them we'll send them a task sheet with our cost recovery for Chris's time and Norman's time as well. And so I told them it's looking to be about $10,000, $11,000, but we will provide invoices. They said they would pay that.
Okay.
So again, we're just going at their word, but we will be sending the charges to them, and they indicated they will pay those charges.
And that was a conversation we had via phone this morning.
Okay.
Total weight abated, 11,720 pounds. This is a high amount compared for normal summary abatements, but we feel the issues here are justified and needed to occur to avoid further issues. Here are the invoices. Basically, $6,000 for this was a 2-day abatement. $6,000 the first day, $687.35 for the second day. I also want to give a report that there was assistance provided. Lake County Sheriff offered assistance. They did cite occupants that were in the red tag property. Animal Control was also called out to the property. We found 18 dogs on the property, 1 boa constrictor, and feeder mice and rats also, in addition to the rats and vermin that were part of the garbage. Animal Control, I don't believe, took these animals, but they did go through their processes, and they did assist us with making sure that they're in a better place.
Oh my,
18 little dogs.
I know, but 18 dogs.
I just wanted...
Were they barricaded in those rooms?
There was one room where 9 small dogs were all inhabiting. The other dogs were in kennels, and then there were about 3 that were kind of free roaming, and there was 2 larger dogs in the backyard.
Were they breeding dogs in all of this?
I believe they were all capable of breeding, but I don't know.
We don't have any evidence to support any
that there's
breeding
actually
was
breeding
occurring.
activity going on.
Okay. Well, this information was not part of our package.
I apologize.
That's okay. That's okay.
It's just, I thought information and material
Yep.
to the report, and I also wanted to also acknowledge the assistance provided. You know, code enforcement, a lot of times we don't operate in a vacuum. We have issues. All right, so That being said, staff does not have a recommendation at this time. Basically, we're just meeting the statutory requirement of providing a report, although any comments or direction from the board would be appreciated, but we're just meeting the statutory requirement at this time. And that ends the presentation.
Well, when you sent these to me last week, it was, I'm so grateful that you were able to move so quickly and get this done. And this was a hard job for your team. And I have deep, deep gratitude that you all did it, because this had to have been one of the worst things that you've possibly ever done. So thank you so much for doing that and taking care of this problem and moving so quickly. I don't know if anyone else has it. Supervisor Green.
Yeah, I don't know if it's even a good inquiry, given the laundry list of violations, but where I saw a vehicle, were there any inoperable or dismantled vehicles that need to be abated?
So this is a summary abatement. We're only abating the immediate issues. A vehicle in this sense we did not feel met that criteria. I believe the car,
There is one vehicle still left on the property. It is movable under its own power, but has a shredded tire.
again, we were very careful and diligent, and we acted very responsibly here. We made sure with the contractors we're only taking those issues that we believe to be unsanitary and immediate health and safety issues. Chris and Joey spent the day, whole day at the property ensuring that we did not go above and beyond what is allowed for a summary abatement.
Second question, I know that's not an action item, and I'm looking at the code here, Chapter 13, to see when you have violations of the severity and scale. I don't see it in Chapter 13, but maybe elsewhere in the Health and Safety Code. Is there any ability or opportunity when coming across situations like this you mentioned the sheriff was out, at some point, and I don't know who the responsible parties are, I'm glad somebody's like bending over backwards, say we'll pay for it now, but between the owner and the renter and whatever responsible parties are attached to this property, I don't know, if there's any potential for misdemeanor referrals or something like that, but is there anything within the toolbox that code enforcement has that would allow analysis of whether it's this violation or not, or some equally serious or even more serious violation, that it would not just be a summary abatement followed by the standard nuisance abatement process, but maybe also a referral to law enforcement?
I'm not going to be able to comment on behalf of the sheriff's office or the district attorney's office. That is something we could make a referral on. It would be up to them to determine how they would proceed, but I can't comment on their behalf. And I don't want to make a comment on the appropriateness of it, but I'm sure a referral can be.
Maybe when there's not a case-specific thing, it's just something that.
Yeah. For us, immediacy was the issue. This took about 2 weeks to go through this whole process, from receiving a complaint, seeing it, doing the inspection warrant, getting our contractors out there. In the future, if we come across a property of this magnitude or in this condition, we will definitely involve the sheriff's office and let them make a determination. Yeah, the sheriff was there to provide assistance in the execution of the inspection warrant. Also, the property was continued to be occupied by the occupants, so the sheriff's office did cite them. I appreciate the sheriff's office for citing someone for staying in an occupied red-tagged house. So in the future, it's something we'll consider and make sure and make that referral.
All right, thank you.
Supervisor Sabatier.
I always appreciate whenever we do a cleanup, but I do have some questions on this. I'm not going to say that it's an exact replica, but I can't help but think of like Barrel Way, where it was an absolute disaster there. And doing summary abatements increases our potential liability risk rather than going through the standard process. Is this a new pathway that you're kind of looking into to try to utilize? Because I'm just trying to figure out why here and not in other places, and how do we get a better understanding of when yes, because it's yes, there is a marshland or a sensitive habitat, but places like Barrel Way also have neighbors within range that are impacted by this. So I'm just kind of curious how we can either utilize this more and make sure the risk remains as low as possible, or what made this special in comparison to other things that we've seen that are absolutely just disturbing.
So the summary abatement criteria is of a higher standard than our nuisance abatement procedure. We have to, it's not a decision that we just make within our department, but when our code enforcement staff has observed something that they think qualifies as an immediate public health and safety threat, not just a nuisance, that is when they will pursue, that's when they will come back. And it requires conferring and agreement with county council, the chair or the supervisor of that district, as well as the director, me. And so if all are in agreement, that is when we move forward. So we did do that as well recently for Kugelman, only specific to the illegal electrical work that was done, because that portion of the overall project was deemed to be an immediate public health and safety threat. And so it could be that, I don't want to speak to the different cases specifically, but sometimes when we start with a nuisance abatement, if we don't see an immediate public health and safety threat, not a nuisance itself, but something that rises to the level of an actual danger to the public, then we'll continue with the due process system of the nuisance abatement. So summary abatement is not a new thing, but as I'm sure the board can understand, when our staff did start reviewing this complaint case, it was clear that this was not similar. This was not the same as what would normally be a nuisance abatement. However, as Manager Beltramo has stated, our staff was extremely careful to limit the abatement of the summary abatement items to that which were deemed to be the immediate threat. And the case remains ongoing through the nuisance abatement process for the rest of the items. Though I'm sure the rest of the items are as objectionable to the neighborhood as what has already been cleared to date.
Well, and it's not about nuisance objection to the neighborhood. It's about meeting that specific threshold of endangering the neighborhood.
Indeed.
So it's not about how many loud voices you have out there. It's about a specific criteria.
Yes.
It's the general welfare of the occupants and the surrounding neighborhood. So you have to look at it from the totality of the issues, and then you throw in the environmental issue. But to answer your question specifically, what this is an example of is this is our training and our experience. This is a maturing code enforcement unit with experienced code enforcement officers who see these things, know how to address these things, know the laws and the tools allowed to us to, when you pull up on the scene, you don't see all this stuff in the house. Based on our training experience, we said, we have reason to believe there's something bigger going on here because we see this we've seen this over the last 1-2 years. We knew we had reason to believe there were more in there. So this is a maturing code enforcement unit. When we come across these things, we are going to push and make sure they're not additional or greater issues that affect the health and safety. If we just left it at the front, this would have continued. And again, in my experience, this probably would have ended up in a fire because we've seen it 2 or 3 times on other properties throughout the county. So what this is indicative of, in my opinion, is experienced officers who have the training and understand how to get the job done. So that would be my opinion of why this happened, and it didn't happen in other situations.
Okay. And then I guess my last question, don't you have the power to shut down PG&E to a house rather than walking away and thinking there might be rats still in the walls that might be chewing on the wires? It's already red tag, so nobody should be in there. So I would suspect, I know our fire departments can shut down PG&E when there's like a fire or an incident that they're dealing with. Don't you have similar powers?
So the building official has that ability. I apologize, it did not cross my mind in this instance here. There were a lot of moving parts. Remember, we're not just focusing on this. We have other code enforcement issues we also are dealing with at the same time. So I appreciate that, bringing that to attention, and that's something else we'll build on in the future and make sure that doesn't occur. Also, I'd have to think about it too, to review the facts if we have a basis to cut power immediately. I'd have to review that code and see if the criteria occurring there meets that standard. But I think that's a good point. Thank you for bringing it to our attention.
I mean, the reason is the pictures and the comment from the chair, which is you didn't get rid of all the vermin. You have proof that the vermin is already chewing on the wires, and so leaving it on and allowing that to continue while you wait for this process of foreclosure and whatnot to occur, at least it would limit the potential for another hazard to be created?
I agree. I think the way I perceived it is that we had rat's nests in the garbage. I think by removing that, we lessened it. I think your point is valid as well. So again, when it comes to code enforcement issues, you can see the multitude of issues that are involved in this and how many different things we have to interpret, digest, and then put into action. So I appreciate you bringing this to our attention, and I think that's a valid concern, so yes.
Supervisor Crandall?
Is it also like with this situation, with the cooperative, with the actual owner or the potential owner, is that what's making it a little more possible to move forward?
So there's 3 owners for the property. 2 of them we could not locate. The one that we met on the initial site visit, I believe to be under the influence and was not really responsive. The occupant was 27 weeks pregnant, and she was not willing to work with us. So I can't really speak to that issue. I don't anticipate any cooperation. They would not allow us to do an inspection initially. They would not sign the right of entry, which is why we need an inspection warrant. Again, if this was not a summary abatement, we would have just had to kind of go through the 30 days process. We do have tools to deal with property owners that are not cooperative. In this instance, we use that tool. So hopefully that answers your question.
It does. It kind of leads me to a lot more issues in places like this that we could build off of. Yeah, including Barrel Way. Thank you for mentioning that. I know it's.
I just want to make sure we treat every area equitably, and I think as we're learning, maybe we'll see that. I see Barrel Way as being a potential of being that same type of issue.
So Barrel Way is coming in front of the board in 2 or 3 weeks for an appeal, so we can address that issue at that time. But yes, I appreciate you bringing
And I'm
Barrel.
speaking about the one we've already done in the past. I have no idea what's coming in the future.
So Barrel Way is a problem property. Of course, it's not germane to this issue, and I don't want to get too sidetracked on that issue, but Barrel Way is a issue.
Okay. Supervisor Green?
Yes, just very briefly, I did find there is within Chapter 13 potential under 13.44 to bring forward an infraction or a misdemeanor charge in addition to any other remedy provided by Chapter 13. And although we don't want to put our thumb on the scales of that, your department is maturing, and so part of that maturation process may involve some internal calculation as to when 13.44 may apply. And again, without putting my thumb on the scale, what you have presented here today is serious. And I don't even think this administrative misdemeanor under this, but again, there may be other things with the other codes involved here, without knowing the responsible parties or the property owners and all that, but not in addition to the deplorable conditions themselves, and knowing there are other properties in similar circumstance. Some days, and today would be that, is the imposition of administrative fines and penalties and due process for everyone seems wholly inadequate to the seriousness of the situation that's presented. So I just encourage you as you continue to mature. 13.44 just came up on my radar, and will certainly come up when we get future appeals. Thank you.
I'm going to open it up for public comment. I'm not seeing anyone in the chambers. Is there anyone in the Zoom room? Okay. This was a presentation to fulfill your statutory requirements. So thank you so much. No.
I'm both thankful and I want to apologize to code enforcement staff for having to deal with this and confront it. That's disturbingly disgusting.
And the contractor that had to crawl across the garage. Oof. Okay, thank you so much, and thank you so much for your work. Our next item is 6.8, our 1:30 PM item, sitting as the Board of Directors of the Lake County Watershed Protection District, consideration of draft comment letter to the State Water Resources Control Board regarding draft emergency regulations proposed for the Clear Lake watershed. This was assigned by the board for Supervisors Green and Sabatier to have some meetings and discussion and bring back a recommended draft letter for us to review and potentially submit. What?
Supervisor Green, you want to start this off?
Oh.
Thank you. So in the agenda packet, we did republish the notice and the workshop guide put out by the state water boards. They were here last week with an in-person listening session, which I attended with Supervisor Sabatier. Also this morning at 10 a.m., there was a virtual-only workshop that repeated the same information. And we also attached the draft emergency regulations. We did take Supervisor Sabatier and I worked with departments, including Water Resources, to try to get how, as a county, we may want to respond to these draft regulations. And after that discussion, there was some consensus that we should bring forward our comments as the Watershed Protection District, as opposed to the county itself, or in the case of Big Valley, under the guise of the Big Valley Groundwater Sustainability Agency. And after much discussion, we do have a draft letter presented for the board's consideration today, sitting as the Board of Directors for the Watershed District. I do want to say that our Ag Advisory Committee also took a first look at these regulations in their meeting, did receive a communique from Chair Sharon Zoller, basically resending a comment letter that has already been filed with the water boards by the California Farm Bureau, and urging that we take notice of the Farm Bureau's letter and express support for the bullet points within that letter. And I think that's about I have right now. Supervisor Sabatier, if you want to pick up where I left off.
Yeah, so we did meet with the State Water Board, I want to say it was October 12th, something along those lines. And right away, there was a offer of looking at lessening the scope by eliminating the Upper Cache Creek area, since the main focus with the main interest being the hitch, to continue looking at the Middle Creek area, Scotts Valley area, and the whole Big Valley area for those creeks of importance, to ensure what water flows look like and the interaction between groundwater extraction and water flow. So we had those conversations. There was no yes 100% that's what they would want to do, but there was agreement from all parties that that was something that we can all agree to. So that's in the letter, to eliminate the Upper Cache Creek area. Then we looked at the setbacks, which right now there are no setbacks. It's the entire Clear Lake watershed. It was brought to our attention here at our board meeting from Supervisor Simon about the Sonoma County well ordinance. That was discussed as well in our communication outside of the board meeting. And the Sonoma County well ordinance is probably the most recent and the most, I'm going to say, arduous or restrictive of well ordinances in the state of California, and they use a maximum of 750 feet setbacks from creeks of importance. And so we utilized the 750 feet in our request to lessen the scope, so that we're not asking folks outside of that area to be a part of the study, to be burdened with the study. That does not mean that they can't volunteer to be a part of the study, but as far as the information order that would be provided by the State Water Board, that it would be within that scope. There is a request to make the attempt to not use fines in order to get to compliance. And also there is a request in the letter to provide all of the information that has been gathered and the conclusion of the studies from all the data that they've gathered to be brought back to the local jurisdiction so that we can create a local ordinance ourselves rather than allowing, just basically saying to the state, please control our water and do what you please. We feel it's important to continue to have local control. It's also important to understand and read through these studies and obtain the data so that we can make wise decisions both on matters of the hitch, but also matters of future development and things of the kind. And I think that summarizes the rest, and open for comments or questions.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you both cooperating and collaborating on this and working with our staff. It's exactly what we were asking for, and it's fairly concise. Do we have any other questions or comments from the other board members? Vice Chair Simon?
Yeah, just comment on, and obviously this will be controversial, but I'm going to say it. The hitch, I don't know if I can agree with removing the Upper Cache Creek watershed. Hitch were collected there. I mean, there's one of the oldest villages, which is now Anderson Marsh State Park. It wasn't put there by the tribes because it was a neat place to be. It was because that was a gathering place. It was a place you collected the hitch, all those things that came together in that area. And to take the aspect that, well, we'll concentrate on the other ones, but not where the actual hitch were, because they went up all the tributaries, Upper Cache Creek, everywhere around the lake. Yeah, I thought the letter was really good, but excluding those areas, going to be challenging, because were any tribes involved in that conversation of taking the Upper Pewter Creek cache?
The conversation was solely between Water Resources, Supervisor Green, myself, and the Water Board.
Yeah, it's like a step backwards from a tribal standpoint. But okay.
Supervisor Green?
I want to acknowledge that. It really kind of reflects the difficulty, for example, of the Blue Ribbon Committee. You know, we talk about projects that may benefit the watershed generally, Clear Lake generally, and of course, all those projects are important and would raise the fortunes of the Clear Lake hitch when applied with that broad brush. And as it was proposed by the water boards, they did include the Upper Cache Creek watershed and these other watersheds depicted on our map as comprising a single hydrological unit that is defined in whatever the national database is of watersheds that define these regions. It makes sense from a basic jurisdictional standpoint that you would incorporate that single hydrological unit and include the Upper Cache Creek. But even the State Water Board's map doesn't include the entirety of Lake County. It does exclude the northern, forest lands. It does not extend as far south as Middletown because that watershed is not directly tied to the fortunes of the hitch. But I think that the single strongest thing that may argue for the exclusion is the fact that this is an emergency regulation with a one-year sunset period by default unless they extend it. And having watched our state and federal partner agencies and the tribes basically work so hard throughout this last year under the guise of the Clear Lake Hitch Task Force, which is led by California Department of Fish and Wildlife. There's this ongoing Clear Lake Hitch Strategy Agreement, which is being driven by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, which continues to do its own analysis of whether this fish should be listed as endangered under the Endangered Species Act. So there's plenty of work that continues to go on in all of our watersheds, including Upper Cache Creek, that are not outlined in this emergency information order that the State Water Boards is doing. What the State Water Boards wants to find out is where are the wells, how many of them are there, how many of them are closer to the watersheds, how many of them are farther out in the center of the groundwater basins. Is there any distinction to be made between them? What can we infer from the data we get there? So knowing that long term, obviously, hopefully, all of our streams and tributaries that are important to Clear Lake hitch survival will be incorporated in that longer-term vision, knowing that we have a pretty short timeline and we do have limitations on staff resources, both at the state and the local levels, to dive into this. It seemed most prudent to focus on where the action is now, and where the action is now, where the current focus of study continues to be most acute is in the map that we show. You know, Manning, Kelsey, Adobe, Scotts, Clover, you know, Middle Creek, Manning Creek, all of these things that are not the only streams of importance to hitch survival, but the primary streams of greatest interest right now. And so that was the thought of it. And you know, I'm interested to hear what other people think of that proposed exclusion, because it wasn't something the state water boards came up with, and I don't know that the State Farm Bureau took a position on that. So I acknowledge your concerns. Certainly the path of least resistance would be follow the State Water Board's recommendation, but we think we will allow greater focus in these areas of interest while reducing potential opposition to the State Water Board's efforts in those watershed lands that may be of less importance initially to Clear Lake hitch recovery.
Supervisor Sabatier.
And I just want to respond to that. It's definitely an important creek, but it's a very different creek. Every other creek goes into the lake. This creek leaves the lake. And so this takes lake water. If the lake is at -9 Rumsey, then we'll see huge problems in Cache Creek. But if it's at 0 Rumsey to -3 to 4 Rumsey, there's still water within the creek. The other creeks are where the water flows have issues because they're only limited to what's above stream, not what's coming from the lake. And so it has a vastly different ecosystem in a sense than the other creeks that are flowing downhill into the lake versus coming out of the lake and then continuing its flow towards the Sacramento River Valley. So I think that's why it's seen as a different one, not to lessen the importance of it, just that the issues within that creek are completely different than the issues within the other creeks.
Okay.
Supervisor Crandall?
Yeah, I hear all of that, and I just wanted to comment on what Supervisor Green said. I know that we want to focus on what's important right now. I know that's very important, but at the same time, there's going to come a time if we don't look at all aspects, because I'm thinking of the Clear Lake Oaks area where I think it's Shingle Creek. I know it's been completely filled in to where there's really no activity as much as there used to be, and so now it's not even considered. But you know, eventually one of these other areas are going to be in the same situation because of the sediment, and so then next will be, well, we can only focus on what's important. So if it's just Kelsey Creek at that time, then we're focusing on that. Or if it's Scott, you know what I'm saying? Eventually we're going to get to a point where, unless we figure out that sediment thing, and I'm not trying to argue it, I'm just letting everyone know, like this, we're talking about all this other water studies and wells, and I'm like, the sediment's eventually going to put the hitch in a situation where they're really going to go, you know. So that's all I wanted to add.
I really appreciate that comment, if only because there was like, this is concise, but there were like 5 paragraphs all about sedimentation that didn't make the cutting room floor because of the sage editing advice that was given. So I definitely agree, sedimentation above and beyond the ongoing studies about TMDLs and phosphorus loading in the lake or what have you. The structural challenges in the creeks, both sedimentation, gravel mining damage, you know, bridges, culverts, all that stuff, again, already under study. So one reason we kind of redacted that from this is we're already studying structural challenges in all of the creeks, and sedimentation is being studied, although under the TMDL umbrella, at least they know sedimentation is a big thing in the creeks. So that's not called out specifically in the regulation, and so we chose eventually to remove my thoughtful comments on sedimentation from this letter because it seems there's other more appropriate times and places to raise those concerns. But I totally hear what you're saying, and I totally support that.
And not,
Supervisor Sabatier?
excuse me, sorry, not to repeat exactly what was said, but yeah, it's about compartmentalizing what the information order is about. The information order is about extraction and diversion of water from the creeks. Absolutely, there's an issue with gravel and nutrient load that eventually blocks up the creeks. Fish and Wildlife just did that presentation about some of the work that they're doing. Let's make sure to keep doing that work, but this is specific to water flow through the impact of extraction of groundwater and diversion. So that's why it was compartmentalized to just that.
I'm curious if there are other concerns with the letter?
See, we had a public comment, right?
Yep.
We had a public comment on adding in the voluntary action section. I'll jump back
It's
here.
the,
Just to
One of
add-
the last paragraphs. I
yeah,
think.
and should we go to public comment?
Oh, yeah, yeah, I guess so.
Okay, I was
It was here, it was being.
Yeah, sure, we've got some public comment, we've got some people in the room. I am just
I saw it on
wondering,
the
we've had this conversation about the, designating what part of the watershed, and I'm wondering if the other points, if there are issues with the other points. Supervisor Crandall, did you have any? Did you?
No.
Okay, let's open it up for public comment. We'll start with the people in the room. Do you have anyone coming up for comment?
Hi, everyone. I'm Rebecca Harper. I'm the Executive Director for Lake County Farm Bureau. I just wanted to say a couple things. First of all, Moak, made a point, and this might be an interesting sentiment to respond to that with, but to me, and from a Farm Bureau perspective, I don't necessarily see why there would be any reason to exclude the Upper Cache Creek portion of the watershed. And additionally, I think that excluding it may only confirm suspicion that some of these regulations are directed towards agriculture. That area has a less prominent agricultural landscape than this area does. And so by excluding that, I don't know how that looks from an optics perspective, but that's the way that I would perceive it. So I might offer that for consideration as well if you decide on either including that or removing that from the letter. Additionally, I think otherwise this letter is very well written and presents some strong points. I think that it's very important to keep control locally over anything. When you give up that control, you have nothing, and it spirals very quickly. And it's really hard for me to stand up here today and think back on months ago in February when we had this discussion. And there was some strong opposition to authoring the emergency proclamation for those reasons exactly. And so it's hard for me because of that reason, just that we're in this position and that there's an opportunity for state entities to have more control over our local resources than we do. But otherwise, Farm Bureau, I think, supports this letter with the exception to the Upper Cache Creek comments, which I'm not really partial to it either way. That's just my perception of removing that. So thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else in the chambers wishing to give comment? No? Do we have anyone in the Zoom room? Any hands up? No. Okay. Okay, we do have public comment that was submitted earlier this afternoon. I'll just read it since it came to the board late. It's from Planning Commissioner Miley Field. She said, "Thank you for considering this letter to the State Water Board. I ask you for clarity to consider adding the words agricultural users in the second to last paragraph, so the final verbiage is we oppose opposition of fines and enforcement actions on agricultural users, individuals, and single-family residences during the implementation of the emergency regulations." Oh, I'm sorry. Even if authorized. The agriculture community is very upset that the tribes are not focusing on the real issues, predation and water quality. Many members of the ag community assist in the relocation of stranded hitch in the spring, and this feels like a slap in the face. If the board's action leads to restrictions on water use during frost season or at any other time, the results will completely devastate all agriculture in the watershed. Thank you, Miley Field Organic Pear Grower, Kelseyville. Supervisor Sabatier?
I think that the idea behind the way it's phrased currently was to kind of cover everybody. Obviously, people are going to feel left out, so why don't we look at maybe changing it to actions on property owners during implementation of the emergency regulations. That way it covers everybody. We don't have to identify specific who. That way it covers single-family residences, because there's not just single, there's vacant lots, there's, I just think property owners would cover that, and I'm okay with that change.
Supervisor Green?
Well, I mean, with that change, it would basically say adopt the fines, but don't use them. And I don't know that that's super helpful. The nuance that we attempted to introduce was clearly a domestic water user that just has a home supply well versus a larger agricultural operation that may have multiple wells, multiple properties. So to the extent there is concern about the burden of whatever reporting requirements the State Water Board is going to go, and the way they're phrased broadly in the emergency regulations, they do want to find out about well locations. There's plenty of people that don't have any good information on the wells on their own property, especially if they bought the property recently. There are plenty of long-term residents who may not have complete understanding of the wells or flows or levels or the information that the Water Board is going to be requesting. I do want to highlight that to the extent there are local control or some concern about restrictions, this is very carefully phrased. This is an information order that applies to information only. They want information from us, but they aren't proposing any type of limitations or management actions or anything of that nature that would be predicated by this data, because again, we don't know what we don't know. So we could add agricultural users, we could add small water systems, we could add domestic and all that. The original wording was just basically to say not all water users are created equal, so the smallest of the small, those single-family residences, those that are on domestic supply wells only, seemed like a fairly low-hanging fruit to urge the state water boards to show discretion on fines, but I'm basically okay with any word change because I still expect them to show that discretion even if we ask for a broader exemption.
So I guess I'm not clear. Was this an inadvertent omission or was this intent with leaving the ag users out?
I will say that we had two different perspectives on the way we read that section. I did not, when I see individuals, I thought that covered everybody, and then single-family residences means that it's a residence on there.
Some property owners are corporations, for example.
Okay, so it was your intent to limit, or was this a?
No, I did not even
want-
ask the question. I assumed that I knew that in reading it that it covered all in the idea of let's work together rather than having to enforce fines.
In your intent or interpretation?
Was more focused on individuals and residences. I think the scope of what they're asking for, especially for larger ag operations, to the extent this information order is going to be effective, and that some people may be needed to be nudged toward compliance. And again, nobody likes the scary letters with the fine language on it, but that's that's how they do their things. They put out the request for information. They do look to voluntary actions. They do envision and encourage the possibility of third-party compliance tools to help with reporting. And those may be helpful to both larger outfits and smaller residential users. But I distinguish in my own mind between a small residential person on a single domestic well and larger land uses and larger companies that use water. And so to the extent we want to ask for not a free pass from the state water boards, but to apply some discretion, I focused on the smaller domestic water user. But if there's not consensus to do that, we can certainly change the wording or strike the paragraph. And before we're done digesting it, I'm also open to the idea that we would bring Upper Cache Creek back in, but I did want to loop in Water Resources staff to make sure that we correctly identified some potential geographic limitation in scope that would potentially make their job easier, even though this is a state water board reg. So I don't want to make a change on the geographic scope without at least offering the opportunity for Water Resources to chime in.
Do we have Director De Leon?
Yes, good afternoon. While I appreciate the opportunity to chime in, I think we're going to have to live with whatever the state decides here, and I don't think it's really going to impact our department significantly one way or the other. I think we've got a bit of work ahead of us, and I appreciate all the comments that everyone's made today, and this is a really difficult issue. But I will do whatever the board decides, and we'll adjust. So I apologize for really not having any substantive comment here, but we'll do whatever the board decides, and frankly, whatever the state decides, we'll adjust to that.
Thank you, Director De Leon, and thank you again so much for your hard work last week. If you were not our Public Works Director, you would be a mean editor, and I appreciate your candor.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Okay. We have any other comments?
No, I made my comment.
You made your comment, and Supervisor Crandall?
In what aspect? I'm still trying to figure out who determines what real issues are on the public comment.
Real issues or real users?
Yeah, well, let's see.
Is it any user?
No, it was,
Oh,
the agricultural community is very upset that the tribes are not focusing on the real issues.
Oh,
Who
that.
determines the real issues? I mean, because in every different aspect or every different entity in the community is going to think of their issues as the real issues, so that's all. But are you asking me if I agree with changes, the changes like the Upper Cache Creek Basin, or is that where you're
well, let's start with that.
I made my comment. I'd
You
like
made
to-
your, yeah.
Like it added back in. At this point, obviously, I did not take it from the agricultural conversation, but I thought that was a very good point made here at the, taking it from that point. But, and I'll go to the other issue, adding the agricultural community on the fines. I'm okay with that comment, because what we are looking to do, and it is right, the state's going to make a decision that needs to be made. But I think we have always, at least my intention going in this, is working together. I said it last time they were here. I saw a 10 suggestion way of how we could change some things with the hitch and other stuff from the agriculture and the Farm Bureau when it came through in these conversations. And I think we continue working in that direction. So adding for that request to say agricultural users should be added to that second paragraph where it was suggested. So those are my thoughts.
Right, so, did you have something to add?
No, I just want to see if I can loop this together. It sounds like we're building toward consensus that on the first page of the draft letter.
I
under
was
the-
about to give my comment, so.
All right, thank you.
Do you have a comment, or you, okay, thank you. I don't see a clear reason why we should change the watershed. I think we want to, well, obviously, we want to keep and maintain as much local control as possible, but we also want to be very even with all of our residents and businesses and users and tribes, and move forward together as well as we possibly can. And so I think if we're picking and choosing water users and we're dividing up the watershed, we're not going to accomplish that. And so I do agree with Vice Chair Simon that we keep the same watershed map, and that we are more inclusive in our language with the water users. We can either say all water users, I think we should say all water users or all property owners. Well, I don't know, is property owners, do we have water users that aren't property owners? So then all water users.
And I'm okay with the language that was.
Microphone.
I'm okay with the language that was proposed by adding the agricultural users, individuals, and single-family residents. I don't know if water users covers more.
Well,
therefore-
are we missing people then if we just keep adding words in, or should we be more broad in
And
our
I'm,
definition?
and I'm fine with either or. My goal in walking into the meeting with the water board and all, was to minimize asking people who do not need to have an impact from this. So if you're 5 miles away from a creek, it didn't make sense to me for you to have to receive an information order versus if you're within that 750 feet. Especially, we know how segmented our groundwater basins are, that you could be 200 feet that way, you're drinking from a different basin. And so the idea that it was so broad, this is why we came back with the 750 feet, but all of the creeks feed the lake. There's one creek that exits the lake, and it's not based on, if there's a draw from those creeks, it would pull water out of the lake. And I'm just gonna say it, yes, this is very much, from the water board perspective, being aimed at the heaviest potential water users. So they are looking at agriculture, which is why the water board was stating that they are not in favor, but they were definitely thinking of looking at getting rid of the upper Cache Creek. If there's no water in Cache Creek, that means we have a problem in our lake, and it's a whole bigger problem. I see it very differently as far as it goes. Making my argument, I'm ready to move forward, but I just think water flows in one direction, from the creeks to the lakes, out Cache to the lakes, to the lake, out Cache Creek, not from Cache Creek into the lake and out somewhere else. And so it's a vastly different situation in that way.
Well, we do have other creeks flowing into the lake that are excluded into the Oaks Arm. There's other creeks here. It's not just Cache Creek.
And I
I'm
think
comparing the two maps.
I think the other creeks, and I don't have the terminology, Supervisor Green, the creeks that are only active during like a flash flood or during a heavy rain, and then within a matter of a week or so, they're back to being dry.
Right.
Ephemeral.
They're not highlighted
Ephemeral, yeah.
as the priority streams.
Yeah.
Right.
And within the letter, it requests that we do not look at those creeks or the wells nearby of those creeks, for the fact that they're not long-lasting enough that runs should be seen.
So if we're only looking at 750 feet from these primary streams, does it matter then?
And again,
We limit the watershed?
like I stated, my goal was to limit the ask to those that should be asked versus those that shouldn't be bothered by something that is asking them to do something more. There's a lot of unknowns. There's also how do you provide the data, what devices? There was no answer from the water board if they're going to be paying for these. Most likely they will not. And so as a property owner, you're going to have to take on the the burden of making sure that you purchase these devices to be able to either meter or read the levels of your well and provide that data. It's not a extreme burden, but again, in my opinion, if there's no need to ask those individuals, then let's not add an extra burden for an extra cost on top of everything else that is already costing more for every individual in our community. Again, I'm ready to move forward. I just made my argument, and I think it has logic to it, but that's just me.
Okay, do we have any further comments? Supervisor Green?
Yeah, not really a comment, trying to get this across the finish line. So if I'm keeping score, it seems like there's consensus that on page 1 of the draft letter, under geographic scope, we would just strike that entire section. It sounds like there's interest on page 2. And if we strike geographic scope on the first page, we would obviously strike the map that is currently on page 3. And then under voluntary actions, we could change that one sentence of interest, oppose imposition of fines or enforcement actions on, how about agricultural operations and single-family residences?
I think that's still limiting users that we might not be thinking about at the moment.
Other type of users, for example, under the duplicative efforts section, there are community water systems that would be covered by this. We've already stated that we don't think any additional reporting above and beyond what they already do is necessary. There are public water systems that will be covered by this. Again, not all wells are created equal, so some are domestic only, some are ag domestic, and so what wording would you, just all water uses basically is an ask to don't fine anybody regardless of their status. So I think we were trying to differentiate that, for example, property owners with just single-family residences are a distinct case. Agricultural operations are a distinct case. But if we just...
I thought we settled on water users.
Water users?
Water users?
Yeah.
So enforcement actions on water users, period? Not period, but just that single phrase?
I think that's what the consensus was. But can I argue for the geographic scope? You said eliminate that whole thing. I'd like to make sure we keep the last paragraph. If there changes are going to be made, I'd like to keep the last paragraph and just say within the watershed.
So we just say within the watersheds, the regulations should be narrowly tailored?
Yes, because here we say we oppose the regulation to require reporting of water usage of well locations on near ephemeral water courses, which are the ones that are just there for kind of flash flood use more so than as actual creeks that have long-lasting water.
Could we tie that under the next heading, spatial and temporal data?
That
Kind of an introduction?
That works for me.
All right. So the fix would be strike the heading geographic scope, the first 2 paragraphs in that section, move the remaining paragraph minus the introductory clause, starting with the regulations should be narrowly tailored, and put that paragraph under the heading spatial and temporal data, and the rest of it would flow after that.
I'm good with that.
Is there consensus for that? All right.
Yes.
And then on that last sentence, it was just water users, not individuals, not agribusiness, not single-family residences. So I think that's a pretty good laundry list of recommended changes. Hope somebody's writing it down.
Did you get it, Lloyd?
Yes, and just for clarification, any changes to the attachments to the map?
Deleted.
Yeah,
Deleted.
remove the map.
All right,
And the only reference to the map was removed as well, so.
okay.
It looks like if there's consensus to do all that, then if we're ready for a motion,
Yes.
sitting as the Board of Directors for the Lake County Watershed Protection District, I move to approve the draft comment letter to the state water boards as amended and authorize the chair to sign.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Okay, that is the end of our open session items, so we will move into closed session. We have 2 remaining items left. 8.1, conference with real property negotiators pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.8, property APN 024-083-06-5245, 3rd Street, Kelseyville, California. Negotiating parties: A, county negotiators Susan Parker, Stephen Carter, and B, Carlene Ellis and Lorna Sue Sides, under negotiations, term of payment. And 8.2, conference with labor negotiator: A, county negotiators S. Parker, P. Samick, and Rob Howe, and B, employee organizations LCDSA and LCCOA. And we will now go into closed session.